It all started as a joke, a dare tossed around like candy during a late-night hangout with friends. We were sitting around a bonfire in my buddy Caleb's backyard, trading stories about creepy places around town. Someone brought up the old Hawthorne Asylum on the edge of town, the kind of place that always pops up in local legends, shrouded in urban myths, creepy rumors, and a whole lot of fear. You wouldn't last a night in there, Caleb laughed, tossing another log on the fire. Hell, I bet you wouldn't even make it past the first floor. That's when it hit me. I'd been running a small but growing YouTube channel called Dark Realms where I explored supposedly haunted locations, documented the experience, and posted it for curious viewers. It wasn't huge yet, but I was proud of what I had built. Spending the night in Hawthorne Asylum? That could be the video that finally made the channel blow up. I'll do it, I said, louder than I meant to. Everyone turned to look at me, surprised. One night, from sundown to sunrise. Alone. You serious? Caleb raised an eyebrow, half impressed, half concerned. Dude, people say that place is cursed. Like real deal haunted. People who went there say they heard screaming. Some even claim they saw things. I waved him off. I'd been to a dozen haunted houses and abandoned hospitals. They all had creaky floors, drafty windows, and rats scurrying in the walls. That's what most hauntings turned out to be. But I wasn't naive. I also did my research, and Hawthorne had a twisted history that went way beyond flickering lights and urban legends. Built in the late 1800s, the asylum was originally intended to treat patients with nervous disorders. Over the years, it gained notoriety for unethical experiments, overcrowding, and mysterious deaths. It was shut down in the early 80s after a massive fire destroyed part of the East Wing. Rumor had it that the fire was set by a patient who believed the staff were possessed by demons. Official records said 17 people died. Unofficial whispers suggested it was many more. Some say the spirits of those who perished never left. The more I read about it, the more I was hooked. Ghost stories were one thing, but Hawthorne's past was soaked in real tragedy. And that gave the place weight, energy, maybe even something darker. I prepared for a week. I packed my cameras, night vision gear, thermal sensors, backup batteries, and enough energy drinks to last me 2 nights. I told my audience I'd be going dark for 24 hours and that a new video was coming soon. One they wouldn't want to miss. My friends were supportive but nervous. Even Caleb, who had dared me in the first place, pulled me aside before I left and said, "Just don't be stupid, okay? If it feels wrong, get out. We'll still think you're a badass." I laughed it off, but a small part of me held on to those words. On the day of the visit, I waited until just before sunset. The asylum stood about 2 miles outside of town, down an overgrown dirt road surrounded by woods. I parked a little ways off, grabbed my gear, and started walking. The building loomed ahead like something out of a Gothic nightmare. Tall, crumbling, with shattered windows that looked like hollow eyes staring out into the woods. Ivy covered parts of the walls, and the iron gate at the front hung slightly ajar, groaning as the wind pushed it back and forth. I filmed my intro there, standing in front of the gate with my camera on a tripod. Tonight, I'm doing something I've never done before, spending the night completely alone in what's considered one of the most haunted places in the state. The infamous Hawthorne Asylum. I've got all my gear. I've got an open mind. Let's see if the legends are real. As I stepped through the gate and into the asylum grounds, the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting everything in shades of gray and shadow. And that's when it started. The moment I stepped past the rusted gate, something shifted in the air. It wasn't just the cold, though the temperature dropped sharply as I moved closer to the building. It was like the air itself thickened, growing heavier with every step. The gravel crunched under my boots, loud and jarring in the growing silence of dusk. Every instinct in me said I was walking into something I wouldn't fully understand. The asylum stood 3 stories tall, its brick walls cracked and weather-beaten. Ivy strangled the front facade, climbing up broken windows and creeping across the second-floor balconies. Faded letters above the entrance barely spelled out Hawthorne State Asylum. One of the O's had fallen off, leaving behind only a rusted bolt where it once clung. As I approached the main doors, the wood groaned under the weight of years. I paused to film a few shots for my video, slow pans of the exterior, close-ups of the crumbling stonework, and a few eerie stills of the shattered windows. Reviewing them briefly on the camera's LCD screen, I noticed something strange. In one of the shots, a white blur hovered near the second floor. I told myself it was lens flare or a reflection, but a chill crawled down my spine anyway. The main entrance was chained shut, just like I'd seen in online photos, but I knew there were other ways in. Around the side of the building, past an old rusted wheelchair flipped on its side, I found a broken window low to the ground. It was wide enough to crawl through. I took a breath, pulled on my gloves, and carefully slipped inside. Immediately, the scent hit me: mold, rotting wood, and something else. Something metallic, almost like dried blood. I clicked on my flashlight and swept it across the room. I was standing in what used to be a waiting area. Faded green walls peeled in long strips, and overturned chairs lay scattered across the floor. A patient check-in window, its glass long shattered, stared blankly back at me. I turned on my head-mounted camera, then spoke into my handheld recorder. Entered the asylum through the east window. Approximate time: 7:35 p.m. Temperature dropping. Atmosphere tense. The deeper I walked in, the more the building seemed to close around me. I couldn't hear the wind anymore. Even the creaks and groans of old would seem to fall silent, as if the place was listening. On the first floor, I found what used to be a records room. Dust-covered filing cabinets lined the walls, many of them tipped over or rusted shut. I tried opening a few, but most of the folders inside were unreadable, water-damaged and stuck together like cement. Still, I managed to pull out a patient intake sheet, yellowed and brittle, for someone named Agnes Corbin, 1932. Under reason for admission, it simply read, "Delusions, spoke to the dead. Claims voices told her to burn her family alive." I shivered. The temperature kept dropping. I checked my thermal camera. It read 49 degrees Fahrenheit inside, even though it had been a mild 67 outside when I arrived. My breath was visible now, and I hadn't even reached the deeper parts of the asylum. Then the sounds began. At first, it was subtle, a soft tapping like fingers on a metal surface. I froze and listened. The sound echoed from down the hall to the west, in the direction of the old surgical wing, if the building maps I'd studied were correct. I slowly moved toward the noise, careful with my steps, the beam of my flashlight dancing across the peeling walls. I passed a shattered mirror in the hallway and instinctively looked into it. Nothing. Just me, looking more nervous than I wanted to admit. Then a bang echoed from behind me. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest. The door to the records room had slammed shut. I hadn't touched it. There was no wind. I walked back and tried to open it. It wouldn't budge. It was like something had locked it from the inside. I tried to calm myself. Old buildings settle, I whispered into the camera. Doors can close on their own. But I didn't believe it. Just as I turned to continue deeper into the building, the hallway lights above me, dead and dark moments before, flickered for half a second. Then went dark again. My heart skipped a beat. I raised my voice recorder to my mouth. Lights flickered. Door closed by itself. I'm not alone here. I took a deep breath, turned the corner, and continued into the asylum's heart. The first-floor corridor stretched out like a tunnel into darkness. My flashlight beam flickered slightly, whether from low batteries or something else, I didn't know. I tapped it and the light steadied. The walls on either side were lined with old bulletin boards, their notices faded beyond recognition. Some still had yellowed papers tacked to them, weekly meal plans, group therapy schedules, even a staff holiday party flyer from 1978. The floor tiles were cracked and curled, lifting like jagged teeth in some spots. Every step echoed, each creak and crunch sounding impossibly loud in the stillness. I paused every few minutes to take footage, narrate my findings, and breathe in, mostly just to convince myself everything was still under control. Then I heard the whispering. It was faint but unmistakable, like someone muttering just around the corner. I stopped walking and held my breath. The sound stopped too. I turned quickly, nothing. I aimed my thermal camera down the hall. The screen showed a wave of blue, cold spots everywhere, but no signs of a warm body. Still, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I moved cautiously into what appeared to be a patient lounge. The room was large, with high ceilings and big, barred windows that offered only darkness beyond. Several old couches and wheelchairs were arranged in a semicircle. On the wall, a mural depicting cheerful countryside scenes had mostly peeled away, revealing cracked plaster underneath. It was strange, this room felt different, more peaceful. Like a place where patients were meant to feel safe, even if the safety was just an illusion. On one of the tables sat a deck of tarot cards, dusty but undisturbed. I picked one up at random, the Tower. I froze. It's a card of chaos, upheaval, disaster. I shuffled it back into the deck and backed away. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Fast, heavy, running footsteps coming straight toward me. I spun around. The hallway was empty. I stood still for a long time, listening. My breath was shallow, my skin tingling with adrenaline. There was no one there. I was sure of it. But that sound, it was real. I hadn't imagined it. The way the boards groaned. The scuff of shoes against the linoleum. Someone or something had run down that hall. I pressed on. Next, I entered the staff break room. The smell of mildew and rot was overwhelming. The microwave was rusted shut. Lockers along the wall stood open, their contents long gone. But inside one, I found a photo. A Polaroid, dated 1974, showing 4 nurses standing together. 3 smiled. One, the woman in the middle, stared directly at the camera with wide, terrified eyes. Her expression looked more like a warning than a pose. Suddenly, my camera glitched. The screen scrambled. Static buzzed in my headset, and the audio recorder in my pocket began to hiss. I pulled it out. Its display blinked wildly, and then everything cut to black. Dead. All of it. Every device shut down at once. No, no, no. Come on, I muttered, fumbling with the camera. I replaced the batteries, even though they were brand new. Nothing. I tried my backup flashlight. Dead too. My chest tightened. That's when I remembered the stories, the ones that said spirits drain electronics, that they don't like to be recorded, that they know when you're watching. I stayed still, in total silence, for what felt like a full minute. Then I heard it again. Whispers. This time louder. Closer. They came from behind a closed door labeled Therapy Room A. I approached slowly, raising the only working light I had left, my phone screen. I reached for the doorknob and it turned on its own. The door creaked open an inch. I stopped breathing. I don't know what I expected to see, but what I found was worse. The room beyond was pitch black, but just visible in the weak light was a figure slumped over in a chair at the far end of the room, unmoving. I stepped back instinctively, then blinked. It was gone. The chair was empty. I didn't remember walking away, but when I finally looked around, I was back in the hallway, 10 feet from the door. My body had moved on its own. I need to keep moving, I whispered to the camera that no longer worked. Something's not right. This place is wrong. I turned down a new hall, determined to continue, past the nurse's station, toward the stairs. I had barely scratched the surface, and already, the asylum had begun to unravel my mind. I don't remember deciding to go to the basement. It was like something nudged me toward it, subtle at first, like a thought that wasn't quite my own. As I wandered down a dark corridor behind the nurse's station, I found a metal door with no sign, almost hidden behind a stack of rusted bed frames. It was heavy and cold to the touch. When I tugged it open, the hinges shrieked like they hadn't moved in decades. A set of concrete stairs disappeared into total darkness. I hesitated. The air flowing up from below felt stale and thick, like the breath of something ancient. My flashlight flickered again, and though it cast only a faint beam now, I took a deep breath and started descending. The walls were tight here. The concrete stairwell echoed every footstep, making me feel like someone was behind me even though I knew I was alone, or at least, I hoped I was. About halfway down, I noticed scratch marks along the wall. Deep ones. Not just chips in the paint, but gouges in the concrete itself, like someone or something with inhuman strength had dragged their fingers all the way down. The temperature dropped with every step. I could see my breath again, and my phone buzzed once, then died completely despite being at 68% when I checked just minutes earlier. The stairs opened into a wide basement corridor. The ceiling was low and lined with exposed pipes, many of them dripping with rust-colored condensation. My boots squished slightly as I stepped into a thin layer of stagnant water on the floor. The smell was unbearable, mold, rot, and something foul that reminded me of spoiled meat. I raised my flashlight and immediately saw writing on the wall ahead of me, drawn in what looked like charcoal or... no, something darker. They never left. The words were smeared and frantic as if someone had scrawled them in a hurry. My throat tightened, but I pressed forward. This part of the asylum wasn't in the original blueprints I had studied. There were doors here, metal, windowless, each marked with nothing more than a number. I passed rooms B1 through B6. Every one of them had locks, heavy, reinforced, not the kind you'd use for safety but for containment. Whatever was kept down here, it wasn't meant to get out. Room B7's door stood slightly open. I approached and pushed it the rest of the way. The room was empty except for an old gurney with leather straps bolted to the floor. The walls were covered in symbols, circles, triangles, runes I didn't recognize. They were etched, burned, and scratched into every surface. In the corner was a pile of clothing and bones. I stepped closer. They weren't animal bones? That's when I heard humming. A soft, eerie melody coming from further down the hall. It sounded like a woman, calm, even gentle, but entirely out of place in this tomb-like place. I followed it, drawn to the sound like a moth to a flame. The corridor ended at a heavy door with a viewing slot, like a solitary confinement cell. I looked through the slot. The room beyond was dark, but I could make out a figure sitting cross-legged in the center. Not moving, not even breathing, just sitting. The humming stopped the instant I looked in. Then, slowly, the figure raised its head. Her face was pale and thin, with sunken eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dark. She looked right at me and smiled. A slow, impossibly wide smile. The lights in the hallway behind me burst. Every bulb exploded in rapid succession, shattering glass down onto my shoulders. I flinched, turned back to the viewing slot. She was gone. I stumbled back, heart hammering in my chest. My hands shook as I reached for the camera. Still dead. The basement felt alive now. Breathing. Watching. I spun around and started back down the corridor. As I passed room B5 again, I heard a metallic clang from inside. I froze. Another clang. Something or someone was banging on the inside of the door. Hard. Rhythmic. Like a heartbeat. Boom. 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 And then screaming. A blood-curdling scream tore through the basement, echoing off the concrete walls. It wasn't human. It wasn't even trying to sound human. It was pain and rage and hunger all in one violent burst of sound. I ran. Back up the stairs, 2 steps at a time. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I slammed the stairwell door shut behind me and collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. The silence above was a twisted comfort. But I knew deep down the basement had changed me. It had seen me. And it wasn't finished. After escaping the basement, I pressed my back to the stairwell door, catching my breath. The stillness of the first floor felt eerie now, not safe, like the calm that lingers just before a storm. I should have left right then. But something had shifted in me. Not curiosity anymore. Not even pride. Just a deep, irrational need to know what was really happening here. I checked my camera again. Dead. But when I tried my voice recorder just to try, I heard static. Then, underneath the hiss, a voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." My hand went cold. The device hadn't worked for over an hour. I didn't play it back. I just turned it off and shoved it into my bag. The moment I stepped into the hallway again, I felt it, the sensation of being watched. Not like before. Not vague or passing. It was direct, almost physical, as if dozens of unseen eyes clung to every inch of me. I walked faster, heading toward the stairwell that led to the upper floors. I needed a new vantage point. Maybe up there I could find a spot to regroup. Maybe even regain signal and send a message out. Halfway up the staircase, the sound returned. This time it wasn't whispers. It was laughter. Children. Light, joyful, and completely out of place. I stopped on the landing, heart thudding, and slowly peeked around the corner. The second floor was a long corridor lined with old patient rooms. The wallpaper here was floral, faded, and peeling. Toys were scattered across the floor, tiny cars, a plastic doll, a jack-in-the-box lying on its side. It didn't make sense. This was a psychiatric facility, not a children's hospital. And yet, I heard the giggles again. Suddenly, the jack-in-the-box clicked. Once. Twice. 3 times. It played. Soft chimes began cranking out a twisted lullaby, slow and mechanical. I didn't touch it. I hadn't even moved. My mouth went dry as I watched the handle spin on its own, turning and turning until it stopped with a sharp click. Nothing happened. Then the clown popped out. Violently. With a loud snap. I jumped, falling backward and landing hard on the wooden floor. Something ran past me. Quick. Barefoot. I only saw a flash, a child-sized blur, pale and fast, disappearing into one of the rooms. I scrambled to my feet and followed. The door creaked open when I touched it. Inside, the room was filled with dozens of crayon drawings taped to the walls. All of them showed the same thing, a tall, black figure with no face, long arms, and fingers like knives. In every drawing, the children were smaller, trapped, screaming, or huddled in corners. Some pages were torn and had scratch marks across them as if someone had tried to erase the images without success. Then I saw the mirror. Hung crooked on the far wall, its glass was smeared, but I could make out my reflection. And something else. Behind me. I turned, no one there. I looked again. In the mirror, the figure remained. Tall. Looming. Watching. I turned again. Gone. Then the lights in the room went out. Total blackness. My breath caught in my throat. I fumbled for my flashlight, but when it finally clicked on, I wasn't in the room anymore. I was back in the hallway, standing completely still, and all the doors on both sides were now open. Each room was dark, filled with shadows. Then, they stepped out. One by one, silhouettes emerged from the doorways, people or what had once been people. They were transparent, flickering like old film. Their mouths hung open, as if screaming, but no sound came out. One woman clutched her face, her eyes hollow. A man dragged chains behind him, leaving black streaks on the floor. A small girl floated inches above the ground, her head tilted at a sharp, unnatural angle. They moved toward me in silence. I backed away, heart pounding so hard I could barely think. As I reached the end of the hallway, I turned to run, and everything went black. For a full 5 seconds, I saw nothing. No walls, no light, no floor beneath me. Just void. Then, as suddenly as it vanished, the world returned. I was back on the first floor, standing outside the records room. The door that had slammed earlier was now open. Inside, my camera sat on the ground, recording. I didn't pick it up. I just stared, because on the tiny screen I could see myself, standing, still, and something behind me. Closer, closer, then cut to static. I stood frozen in front of the records room, watching the playback on my camera footage that should have been impossible. I hadn't touched it since the basement. Yet there I was, on screen, standing just where I was now, except in the video something stood behind me. A shape. No features, just a void in the form of a human, tall, black, as if it absorbed the light around it. I spun around. Nothing. But I could feel it now. Not just watching, closer. Invading. Like it had gotten inside my mind. The records room was dim and covered in dust. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls, most rusted shut. In the center was a desk, overturned with yellowed papers scattered across the floor. I stepped in, compelled by something I couldn't explain. On the far wall, behind a half-burned curtain, was a corkboard. It held dozens of patient photos, black and white headshots, each one labeled with a name and admission date. Some had red excess over them. Others were scratched out entirely. And one was missing. A square in the center had been torn away, and beneath it, written in red ink or maybe something else, was a single word, host. The air shifted. Suddenly, all the filing cabinets slammed shut at once. The floor trembled slightly under my feet. My ears popped. It felt like pressure was building in the room itself, like the building was exhaling slowly, waiting for something. Then came the whisper. Not distant, not faint, right at my ear. You're ready. I bolted from the room, racing back down the hallway. But it didn't matter where I went anymore, every corner of the asylum felt the same. Like it had closed around me. Doors I hadn't opened were now wide. Mirrors reflected things that weren't there. At one point, I saw my own reflection blink out of sync with me. And then, finally, I reached the atrium, the central gathering space I had passed when I first arrived. It had felt ordinary then. Now it was anything but. At the center of the open space was a chair. A single metal chair. And sitting in it was the entity. Couldn't move. It wasn't a person. Not anymore. Maybe it never had been. Its form was vaguely human, limbs, torso, head, but it was more like a shadow wearing the memory of a body. A black silhouette wrapped in flickering static, like an image out of an old TV trying to hold shape. Its head tilted to one side as if curious, as if amused. And then it stood. It didn't walk. It just glided forward, smooth, unbroken, like it was rewinding reality with every step. My flashlight flickered again. My nose started to bleed. I dropped to one knee, disoriented, dizzy. The lights around me buzzed and dimmed. I heard every sound at once. The screams from the basement, the laughter of children, the banging doors, the humming, all layered into a single, overwhelming cacophony. Then silence. The entity stood inches from me now. It didn't speak in words, but I felt what it wanted me to know. It had once been a man, patient, a doctor. It didn't matter. What remained was rage. Unfiltered, ancient, bottomless. Not anger at being forgotten, but at never being understood. Tortured by isolation, by the walls of this place, by treatments and chains and silence. Over time, it became something else. Fed by fear, by pain, by every soul who had died here in confusion and terror. And now it wanted me, not to kill, to carry it, to take it outside. My body convulsed as the entity reached out. His fingers passed through my chest like cold smoke. Couldn't scream. My throat locked, my eyes wide. My mind began to slip. Not just panic, but disintegration. Like my thoughts were being rewritten. It showed me visions. Patients clawing at walls, nurses locked in with the insane, doctors consumed by their own experiments. All of them, whispering, chanting, feeding it. I saw myself walking out of the asylum. With it inside me, the next vessel, the next host. I gathered the last shred of willpower I had and pulled the lighter from my coat. I flicked it. The flame held. I stumbled backward, grabbing a curtain from a broken window and lighting it. Caught quickly. The dry, decaying fabric burst into flames. Then another, and another. The entity stopped. It recoiled not in fear, but in rage. The asylum itself began to scream. The flames spread faster than I expected. Dry curtains, crumbling papers, and rotting wooden beams. Everything seemed eager to burn, like the asylum itself had been waiting for release. As the fire consumed the room, the temperature surged. Smoke poured into the hallway, thick and choking. I turned to run, but the floor trembled beneath my feet, with groaning, pipes bursting from the ceiling above. The entire building was reacting, alive with the agony of its own collapse. Behind me, I heard it scream. The entity. Its voice wasn't just sound, it was pressure crashing into my skull like waves. Words layered on top of each other, too many to understand, too fast to follow. Some were in languages I didn't know. Others were just raw emotion, desperation, fury, hunger. It was angry. But it wasn't just at the fire. It was angry at me. As I raced through the halls, doorways blurred past. The same rooms I had explored before were now barely recognizable, twisted, warped, almost alive. The children's toys were melted, disfigured. The mirror that once showed something behind me was now cracked, leaking black smoke like blood from a wound. The building was tearing itself apart. I stumbled down a stairwell as the ceiling above gave way with a massive crack. Debris fell behind me, flames licking down through the cracks in the floor. My foot caught on a loose step, and I slammed into the landing, gasping. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then I felt the cold. It was back. The entity was close, closer than ever. I could feel it inside my head, worming through thoughts, memories, dreams. I saw flashes of myself. Leaving the asylum, walking through a crowd, people not noticing the change in my eyes. I felt the horror of carrying it back into the world. I wouldn't let that happen. I forced myself up and pushed through the stairwell door to the first floor. Flames rolled along the ceiling, casting long, dancing shadows that writhed like living things. The front door still chained shut. I ran to it and pulled. Still locked. Smoke clawed into my lungs. I turned, looking for anything to break it. My eyes landed on a metal cabinet near the front desk. Bent, half-collapsed, but solid. I dragged it over, using every ounce of strength I had left, and rammed it against the chains. Once, twice, crack. The door shuddered. Boom! A violent shockwave pulsed through the asylum, knocking me off my feet. I landed hard and rolled onto my back, dazed. The entity was there again, at the edge of my vision, flickering like static. It wasn't moving this time. It was watching, not attacking, waiting, daring me to leave. With everything I had, I got up, lifted the cabinet and slammed it one final time. The chain snapped. I threw the door open. Cold night air hit my face like salvation. I didn't think. I didn't turn back. I just ran. Down the cracked steps, past the rusted gate, across the overgrown yard. Behind me, the asylum groaned like a dying beast. Firelight lit up the windows, and black smoke twisted into the sky like claws. The front entrance collapsed in a shower of embers, sending sparks into the night. And then quiet. I turned, panting, and watched from the treeline as the roof caved in. Brick and wood fell inward like the asylum was being sucked into itself. Flames roared one last time and then were gone. The building stood in ruins. But I didn't feel relief, because the whisper came again. Not from behind me this time. Not from the building. From within me. We're not done yet. I dropped to my knees, trembling. I had escaped the fire. The building. But had I escaped it? I didn't know. I still don't. It's been 3 weeks since that night. The asylum is gone, reduced to a smoldering pile of rubble. The fire department reported it as an electrical accident in an abandoned structure, even though there hadn't been power in that building for decades. The official report barely fills half a page. No mention of the basement. No mention of the voices. No mention of the thing that was still, somehow, with me. I told no one the full truth. Who would believe me? When I staggered into the nearest town at sunrise, covered in soot, bleeding, and incoherent, I told them I was an urban explorer who got lost. They found my burned jacket, my melted phone, and a half-working camera with warped footage that glitched and scrambled any time you tried to watch more than a few seconds. But nothing that could prove what really happened. Since then, life has gone on. At least for everyone else. For me, it's changed forever. Sleep is nearly impossible. Every time I close my eyes, I see it, him, the entity. I don't know what to call it anymore. A spirit? A demon? Parasite? Labels don't matter when something is whispering in your thoughts like it owns them. I dream of that hallway again and again. The doors opening, the black figure watching, waiting. Some mornings, I wake up standing at my window, or in the hallway, or with the front door wide open. I've tried moving. New apartment. New town. I've tried therapy, medication, even a psychic out of desperation. None of it helps. Because it isn't just following me. It's inside me. Sometimes I'll hear music when there's none playing. A faint humming tune from the second floor of the asylum. Sometimes I see my reflection, hesitate. It stares too long. Blinks too slowly. Smiles when I don't. I've caught myself saying things I don't remember learning. Muttering in languages I've never studied. Writing symbols in my notebook I can't explain. I once looked down at my hand and saw black veins for a moment, just a flicker. Like the entity had briefly surfaced before slipping back under the skin. It's not always there. That's the worst part. There are days, whole days, when I think I'm free. I'll walk through the park, feel the sun on my face, and start to believe I left it behind in the flames. That maybe I was never truly haunted, just traumatized. That my mind is broken, not possessed. But then it returns. Not with violence. With presence. A cold whisper in my ear. A flicker in the mirror. A shadow in the corner of the room that shouldn't be there but is. And when it does, I realize something terrifying. I don't hate it. Not entirely. Because in those moments I feel something powerful. A kind of certainty. A connection to something far older, darker, and more knowing than I can comprehend. It doesn't just invade my thoughts. It amplifies them. It understands them. Sometimes it finishes them for me. And that scares me more than the fire ever did. I don't know how long I can resist. I still believe it chose me for a reason, not because I was strong, but because I wasn't. Because I was curious, lonely, desperate to prove myself. I was the perfect host. And now I carry its memory. Its weight. Maybe even its purpose. The asylum may be gone, but what was inside it? It lives. Through me. And if it ever decides to take control completely, if I ever stop fighting, I don't know what I'll become. Or what I'll do. So if you're reading this, if you find this journal, or watch the footage that survived, or hear someone whispering to you from a place that should be empty, don't go looking for answers. Don't go back. Some places aren't haunted. They're hungry. And some things don't want to be left behind. They want to go home. With you.